Hi everybody, my name's Bronwen Golder. It's a pleasure. I know many of you, you know me. I'm not really wearing my Kermadec hat this evening. I think I'm probably wearing my Pew Charitable Trusts hat or my 20 years of working on conservation issues around the world. I currently am director of the Kermadec Initiative for Pew Charitable Trusts in New Zealand. Started my career as a corporate banker in New York. I moved to be a policy advisor in the Beehive, and then I made the transition about 20 years ago to conservation. Until the last 3 years came along and my focus on the Kermadecs, all of my conservation work was overseas, and particularly in facilitating dialogue between government, the private sector and the NGO sector in developing countries around the world. When we as a group met last night, our conversation was, what is this conversation about? Because I think what this evening is intended to be is a conversation amongst all of us about not just the future research agenda for our ocean space in New Zealand, but also for the future of our ocean. And I think that's why the topic of this evening, One Ocean, a lot of what I use in my work talking about our ocean is that there is a space out there, a territory, a jurisdiction, which is ours collectively. And I think what we're struggling with, and this is all my personal opinion, what we're struggling with at the moment is having a collective aspiration for that ocean space. So each of us is doing our piece of work, advocating for what we advocate for, doing our research, informing whether it's the private sector or government policy or the conservation agenda. But I feel like we're missing each other in a larger national dialogue about what is the future of that territory that is under our control, that is our responsibility, and that frankly will be our legacy for future generations. It is also a space, albeit with a boundary line that demarcates it at 200 nautical miles. It is a space that is connected to other people's ocean spaces, to other people's commons, whether it's the fish that is there, whether it's the pollutants that travel through it, whether it's the activities and behaviours of people who engage in those spaces. We are all connected, just as nature is connected. And I think we need to remember that our territorial responsibility, our ocean, is actually the world's ocean. And so we need to think about that in terms of our dialogue. In beginning to think about it that way last night, I went back to UNCLOS, actually, because I think UNCLOS is an achievement which perhaps we tend to forget about today, about how significant it was that in fact the countries of the world came together, albeit over 9 years, and I'm not advocating a 9-year consultation, came together to develop what was called a constitution for our ocean. And that constitution was started in 1967 when the UN representative from Malta stood up at the UN and said, we are destroying our resource. Terrible things are happening. And I think it's worth just reflecting on why, in 1973, the UN and all the members of it embarked on what is probably the most significant piece of global legislation. Why did they do it? They did it because there was a tangle of claims, as they described it. There was spreading damage and degradation. There were competing demands for the riches on the seafloor. There were growing tensions between different values and different rights. There were pressures from the increasing movement and activity of vessels across that space. There was outdated and conflicting doctrine. And it was all, and I'm quoting the United Nations, all threatening to transform the oceans into another arena for conflict and instability. Now that's 1973, they then did 9 years. I'd fast forward to 2014, and I think a lot of that describes what's happening to our territory, our ocean now. I think we're facing a lot of those same challenges. I think in the work that I do, I'm the conservation advocate who's proposing to government and industry and anybody who'll listen to me that New Zealand could create the world's largest marine reserve and that we should do so for the right reasons, for the reasons of science and the health of our ocean and the uniqueness of our biodiversity. But what I find, what I see, what I encounter is increasingly a polarization of views across the different sectors. I see a disenfranchisement of some voices in terms of the ocean discussion. I see a political mandate, a political license, which doesn't necessarily match social license or social values. I see, I think, through that, the erosion of industry's license to operate in the ocean, because there is, the call for no deep sea drilling. There is the concern about mining. We're eroding, because we're polarizing, we're eroding not only what I'm trying to propose, which is protection, which is rejected because we want economic development, but what's happening on this side about we don't want to degrade our ocean space is actually negatively impacting industry. And I know that we're reaching a really significant political moment when industry is walking into my office and asking to work together with us to convince the government on how to change the way that we manage and act and use our ocean. So I guess like UNCLOS and the United Nations in 1973, my sense is that we are reaching a political moment in New Zealand where we need to do something. Because if we don't start to act collectively, if we don't start to have a common understanding of what we want our ocean to provide to us from both a nature and biodiversity point of view and from an economic return point of view, then we're going to end up destroying our ability to manage it effectively. And I think that the tensions and the debate that is starting to rage now, we can either take as an opportunity and say, okay, we know, Simon Upton started with an oceans policy, the Labour government didn't do anything for 9 years, we've got papers flying all around Wellington now about marine science challenges for the seas, MFE's doing stuff, everybody's doing stuff. But what does it really mean unless we convene as multiple voices, multiple, distinct and sometimes quite diverse interests, and think about our common cause, which is the future health and prosperity of our ocean and also our economy. So I know that part of tonight is asking or looking to get your views on that, get your thoughts on what that might mean. I'm not proposing another talk fest. I'm not proposing 9 years of consultation. But I do think we need to find a way forward, and I think we need to find it quickly. I think we need, as a nation, to have a shared recognition that our ocean is a threat, that there are implications if we move in certain directions. We need to understand them, we need to debate them, and we need to make choices. We need to know what our priorities are. We do need a common understanding across iwi, across industry, across NGOs, across government, about what our ocean means to us, and what we want from it in the future. We need to be broad and inclusive and collaborative in a way that I don't think we are being at the moment. I am a conservation advocate, but I am not anti-use. I know a lot of people working in different sectors who are not anti-conservation. Why aren't we having that conversation? Why aren't we really having a conversation about what balance looks like? Why are we excluding conservation from the current debate, protection from the current debate, but in doing that we're actually eroding the opportunity to generate economic benefit? We need to get beyond this kind of impasse. And we need to come up with some common recommendations to our fellow citizens, to our government, to agents of change about what we need to do next to make change happen. Because right now I think we're stagnating, and I think stagnation is going to come at a cost.